tree protection work from SDCI and OSE. Noah, will you please read this item into the record?
Agenda item 3, Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections and Office of Sustainability and Environment Tree Protections Update.
Thank you, Noah. As a reminder to those viewing at home, this is an update of the second quarterly report on tree protection work that the committee has received this year. At our first committee meeting of the year, SDCI and OSE laid out a timeline that included new director's rule and legislation being transmitted to the council by the end of the year. These quarterly reports are required by Resolution 31902, which I helped author as a staff member for Councilmember Bagshaw. A lot has changed last year, and I want to say that it was a year ago right now that we were working on that. I wish that we were moving faster. I think that we all can appreciate COVID has made some changes. I know, like with Councilmember Peterson, we are both wanting to save our trees. So these quarterly reports are required by Resolution 31902, and I remain committed to passing a strengthened tree protection ordinance as soon as possible. We are joined by Chandra Emery and Mike Podolsky of SDCI and Sandra Pinto-DeBader of Office of Sustainability and Environment. Will you introduce yourselves and take away your presentation?
Podolsky, Co-Development Manager at SDCI.
Sandra Pinto-DeBader, Office of Sustainability and Environment.
Chandra Emery, SDCI.
I'm going to start us off with just a quick overview and then turn it over to Sandra and Shonda, who will walk you through the rest of the presentation. I appreciate that council members and many in the community are anxious to see us make more progress on our tree protection updates. I did appreciate a lot of the what I took as praise that we got in the public hearing portion or the public comment portion of the meeting today. That was helpful, I thought, and certainly, not the last of it from us or from the tree advocates. So we're going to start off by talking about our work on the Urban Forestry Master Plan, and I think in particular we want to focus on how we've done work to include and to consider the needs and impacts to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and tell you about the partnerships that we've forged with representatives of those groups. We're going to talk some more about the progress that we've made in meeting the strategies that are called out in the resolution for tree protection updates. And in particular, as we talk about going forward with the strategies that we still have to address, and I appreciate Councilmember Strauss' recognition of some of the intervening circumstances that have occurred that have caused us to do as well as we could in making progress so far, but recognizing that we're going to need a little bit more time here. But we want to re-emphasize, as we've done in our work with the Urban Forestry Master Plan and build on the partnerships that I just mentioned, to take a hard look at the strategies that are in the resolution and make sure we're doing the best job we can in considering the impacts and the needs of BIPOC communities, and do outreach around the upcoming work in culturally relevant ways, and potentially make some modifications to the strategies or come to council at our next quarterly report to talk more about that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sandra, who's going to start with the Forestry Management Plan.
Thank you, Mike. Well, thank you, everyone. We like to begin this kind of briefing with just setting the context and talking a little bit about the Seattle's urban forest. Trees are fundamental to the character of our city. We celebrate our reputation as one of the country's greenest cities, and trees are helpful to continue our high quality of life, especially as we continue to grow. There are 9 different departments engaged in Seattle's urban forestry work. Each department brings important expertise, perspective, and also resources to this commitment. We have created an urban forestry core team with representatives from 7 of those departments: OPCD, OSC, City Light, SDCI, SDOT, Seattle Parks and Recreation, and SPU. And we collaborate on a regular basis to make sure that we are coordinating and that we're strengthening our urban forestry work citywide. And I just wanted to stress, as Mike mentioned, that in the midst of the current challenges that Seattle is facing, OSC and SDCI have continued to work on our tree regulations. The Urban Forest Management Plan sets the goals and the framework to guide our work. The Urban Forestry Corps team began updating this plan in 2018. The last time we updated the plan was 2013. So we began work in 2018 with a commitment to have a robust, inclusive engagement process. And to that effect, we engage BIPOC communities early on to get their input on goals, strategies, and actions of this plan. With data we obtained from the 2016 Canopy Cover Assessment, we confirmed that areas where environmental justice priority communities live tend to have fewer trees, and this further emphasizes the disproportionate impacts, especially during public health crises like the ones we are currently facing. So we found that on average, we have a 28% canopy cover citywide, but when we looked at the census tracts where people of color and low income live, we noticed that there's fewer trees there with an average of 20%. So that's quite a difference. And as we continue to work on in general on urban forestry and specifically on tree regulations, we're going to make sure that we're looking at our work through a racial equity lens in order to advance racial equity and also address disparities. As Mike mentioned, we have been working on the past couple of years on mitigating some of these disparities as we go about our work. We have been intentional on developing and nurturing partnerships with BIPOC communities in culturally appropriate ways and in language. As we began the plan update work, we teamed up with Seattle Public Utilities Community Connections Program. This is a program inside of their Environmental Justice and Service Equity Group. And we applied the city's Racial Equity Toolkit to the project. Community Connections also supported the creation of a strategic outreach plan. And with that in hand, we tapped into Department of Neighborhoods Community Liaisons expertise to engage African American, disabled, Latinx, Native American, senior, Southeast Chan refugees, and unhoused populations. We also worked with community-based organizations such as Chinese Information Service Center, Horn of Africa, the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition, the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps, the Duwamish Infrastructure Restoration Training Corps. We also engage communities in culturally relevant ways. So that means that in some instances, some engagement was done, for example, door to door, and maybe in other instances, it was more of a community meeting type setting. And we did this in 10 languages: Amharic, Cantonese, Khmer, Korean, Mandarin, Oromo, Spanish, Somali, Tigrinya, and Vietnamese. So progress to date on this plan update. At this point, we have completed the first phase of engagement to produce a first draft. We brought this draft to the community for report backs, and currently departments are reviewing the plan. Next steps will be a public input phase. We're going to be, again, emphasizing outreach to BIPOC communities, the Environmental Justice Committee, and other partners in the Duwamish Valley and other areas of the city. We are going to be incorporating this public input in producing a SEPA checklist to then produce a final draft of the plan that we will bring to council in early 2021. And with that, we're going to get into the details of tree regulations work, and I'm going to turn it over to Shanda.
So City Council adopted Resolution 31902 on September 16, 2019, requesting SDCI and OSC to explore strategies to protect existing trees, increase tree canopy cover, and balance city goals to support future growth and density as provided for in the city's comprehensive plan. This resolution also directs SDCI and OSC to report quarterly to the chair of the Land Use and Neighborhoods Committee on progress made. SDCI and OSC delivered the first quarter report on February 12th of this year, and at that time we shared the scope, schedule, and budget for this work. And now this year we're continuing to move forward with this work, including a robust effort to track trees on private property. This means that we're documenting all trees greater than 6-inch diameter at standard height as far back as July 2019. SDCI continues to work with the Urban Forestry Commission and has held a series of deliberative sessions that began in the fall of 2019. And at that same time, we have reviewed the Urban Forestry Commission's recommendations. Today, as we move forward, it's our intention to make sure that we are centering and prioritizing BIPOC communities to provide additional protections to address environmental disparities. Next slide, please. Over the past few months, SDCI and OSC and its partners have been working very hard to improve tree protections as outlined in the resolution. Together, we've reached a number of milestones in this work, including better ways to track tree removal and replacement. This is a brand new update in our permit system software for tree actions. We have GIS analysts working right now to use a new tree tracker worksheet to track existing, preserved, and mitigated trees on private property. We're being very data-driven in our approach to this work, which will allow us to assess what the existing conditions are at the site plan or individual project level, and then we'll use that data to monitor the status of these trees, whether those trees are existing, preserved, and or replanted. We also have developed updates to Director's Rule 2008-16, which is the Exceptional Tree Director's Rule. That Director's Rule is 12 years old, and last week we published a proposed draft rule, which would replace the 2008 rule. These updates in the new rule could potentially address several of the strategies outlined in Resolution 31902, such as retaining and expanding the exceptional tree definition, adopting a definition of significant trees, and establishing a minimum requirement for tree service providers operating in the city of Seattle. Next slide, please. As of last fall, we've had 4 other milestones to report. Greater permit coordination. SDCI hired 2 arborists to assist in the review of permit applications that involve tree removal and advise on code enforcement cases. These certified arborists are key to providing us with high quality tree protection trainings for our plan review and code enforcement staff. We also have improved education and information. This includes the web pages, and now we have staff tasked to update several of the SDCI tips based on the Urban Forestry Commission and SDCI deliberations. For fee in lieu and tree permit system research, SDCI has worked with the University of Washington, specifically a graduate student working on her master's thesis, to complete this research. Her thesis results will be available this summer. For the Tree Data Roadmap project, SDCI hired a retired City of Seattle IT senior analyst to prepare a strategic roadmap for data acquisition, data maintenance processes, and data systems. This work will include a compilation of needs, a summary of insights from a best practices survey, and specific implementation recommendations. We expect these deliverables to be shared in an executive level guidance document by the end of the 3rd quarter. Next slide, please. As far as our next steps, we will continue to move this important work forward. This means that we will be evaluating the outstanding strategies identified in the resolution through a racial equity lens, and then we'll be ensuring that we are centering and prioritizing by engaging BIPOC communities in culturally appropriate ways and in language. I also want to mention that we'll be keeping the committee apprised of the additional progress on our work and will be available to answer any questions leading up to our 3rd quarter report. Over the next month, some of this work will include a targeted focus of virtual meetings, online outreach, engagement, to reach BIPOC residents of Seattle. And through our efforts, we'll be making recommendations as we continue to move this forward in an approach that's explicitly rooted in environmental justice. Next slide, please. So that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shonda. I am sure that some of my colleagues will have some questions. I believe it was slide 8. Yes, perfect. When you are talking about the Director's Rule for Exceptional Trees, which is now available for public comment, you mentioned that we are updating the definition, creating new definitions, requiring all tree service providers to meet minimum requirements. Can you say a little bit more about what you are thinking about, the direction you are leaning in, and how we are proceeding forward at this time?
Sure, Councilmember Strauss. Yes, there's some big changes here, or updates. So the 2008 rule didn't really expand the definition of exceptional trees. And so this new rule is going to be expanding that to include any tree that has a diameter at standard height of 24 inches or greater. And then it's going to include all heritage trees and any tree that is part of a tree grove. This was also further defined. And then all trees listed in Table 1. And then in addition, it states that the removal of any stem, root, or tree part of an existing exceptional tree that would make that tree no longer exceptional is not allowed.
Thank you. And can you say a little bit more about how we are identifying the DBH, diameter breast height, for different species of trees? As we know, a maple will grow much faster and wider than a Doug fir.
Bear with me here for a second.
No problem.
Yeah. So the way diameter at standard height is determined is that it's the diameter of a tree trunk measured at 4.5 feet above the ground. And then it also states that, you know, when there's a branch or like a swelling of a branch that interferes with that measurement at 4.5 feet above the ground, that diameter is measured at the narrowest point below 4.5 feet.
Thank you. That is helpful. I'm wondering if we have different rules or definitions for different species of trees. Is that being taken into consideration, or are we using one method for all tree species?
It is one method.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as Shonda was saying, it is one method. The subject matter experts we've been working with did not bring up the potential alternate approach of having different approaches based on species. The rule is out for an extended public comment period right now, and we can take that under consideration, as well as any other comments that we hear, to see if there are any changes that we should make to the rule. So the question of having different measurement techniques for different species is something we'll bring back to the group.
Thank you. And with that, are there any regulations or requirements regarding the amount of ground soil for trees, such as an exceptional tree?
I'll let Shonda talk about the details of that. We do have some information that addresses that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. In the new update, there is language in there that says that for replacement trees, there's a requirement that we amend, or the applicant amend the existing soil conditions prior to installation and planting of the new trees in compliance with current best practices.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Is there a requirement or definition of quantity of soil?
Yes, That's correct. There's a requirement for quantity and then also adequate spacing for species and location must be appropriate to both the species and the site conditions.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. My last question is regarding enforcement. Even during this COVID-19 pandemic, we have received a number of tips, questions, submissions of tree removals that have happened throughout my district, at least, that were, when we reported them to SDCI, it was in fact not permitted. Can you speak a little bit more about enforcement? How are we doing? What improvements do we need to make, and how can I help you?
Thank you. Just recently, we had a code enforcement case for a tree penalty amount of $99,510 for a western red cedar that was 41 inches. That was in early June in the northeast part of the city. And then before that, there was another code enforcement case around 40,000. I think that's the data that I have right now. I don't know if Mike, you have something to add to that.
Well, enforcement is an ongoing challenge. As Shonda mentions, we have had some successes in holding people accountable who have not followed the rules. We are looking at potentially also updating the director's rule in the future to help further strengthen our enforcement group's ability to hold people to account and to help people do the right thing. So it is something that we appreciate your interest and attention on and support, and we'll continue looking at that and working with our enforcement team.
Thank you. And I know I already said that was my last question. I do have one more per public comment today in creating mandatory street trees. Would that be outside of the jurisdiction of SDCI and something that I would need to bring up with SDOT? Or is that something that can be addressed through a director's rule, or would I need to bring forward an ordinance? And this is the type of conversation that I usually have with SDCI in meetings, but since we're doing virtual governing here, everyone gets the pleasure of seeing my questions live. I'm not trying to set you up for a fast one here. Mike, if you need to answer me offline, I'm happy to take the answer.
Oh, just for starters, as Sandra mentioned in part of her presentation, we do participate in a multi-department it's called the tree core group. SDOT's a participant, and we can raise that issue with them and have that conversation with them, and we can report back to you together.
Great, thank you.
Urban Forestry Core Team.
Yes, the Urban Forestry Core Team. Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Shonda and Sandra. Colleagues, any further questions? Calling on Councilmember Lewis or Juarez, since I don't see you since you're over the phone.
None from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I do see Councilmember Peterson. Councilmember Peterson, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Strauss, and thank you for your leadership on this. I know our first meeting together, we heard from those who want to make sure we preserve our tree canopy, and because it's dwindling as we speak, and to strengthen the tree ordinance. So just appreciate these reports and look forward to the actual tree ordinance, hopefully sooner rather than later. If there's a way to get something before the fall budget process, so in case we need to allocate dollars to strengthen anything in this regard. I am leery about the fee in lieu, because when we heard from Portland, Oregon about that, the fee was never high enough to really disincentivize the removal of the trees, and look forward to increasing the enforcement as well. I know we put our Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections in a tough spot where they're trying to process applications for real estate development and also enforce this. So, look forward to, in the ordinance, perhaps seeing a way to bring the Office of Sustainability and Environment into the enforcement or sign-off procedures, so that we've got somebody accountable for protecting the trees, and it's sort of built into their organizational culture to do that. And I appreciate everybody calling in today. I know during all these virtual meetings, it's hard to keep track of when these reports are coming, so really appreciate everybody taking the time today to call in and hold us accountable for getting this tree ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterson. And I want to highlight these are important updates. As we've heard, some of these updates have been made. The last time the changes were made were 12 years ago. I want to recognize, have a lot more work to do to protect the tree canopy here in our city, as we know that tree canopies keep our environment cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And this is important for the health of our entire city. Councilmember Juarez, do I see you have a comment, question?
Quickly, and I just again want to reiterate, but we've been working on these tree canopies and these tree issues for since 2015. So just very briefly, two things. In District 5, we have Thornton Creek, and we have the North and the South Fork, and both of them are salmon-bearing streams. And so, as you know, we need the tree canopy and the shade for the salmon to survive. And as a lawyer for over 33 years that represented tribes and treaty rights and environmental protections, I understand, I'm sure like we all do, how important it is to have a tree canopy on the shades for the streams, not only for the salmon-bearing streams, but also for the sustainability and all the other great stuff that obviously trees provide. But having this done, and thanks to the quote-unquote tree activists. I remember meeting with their group back in the summer of 2015 when this was an issue for them, and I think it was Mr. Lemke. Am I getting that name wrong? No, Steve Zemke. I think Steve's still there. And I've never forgot their words and their passion, and the same group of people, including John Lombard, who wrote a book about Thornton Creek, and also daylighting all the creeks up here, and that's where it stands now is Thornton Place, which used to be a huge cement parking lot, and we daylighted that. They daylighted that. They worked hard on it. And so I just want to keep encouraging and moving forward. It's wonderful that we have this Green New Deal, and the City Council has embraced it, and we've set money aside, and we've done resolutions, and we put it in the budget. To actually see this starting to come forward with the policy and the statutory authority to support it for sustainability forever is very heartening. And so thank all of you who've worked so hard to do this. To some people it might seem like a trivial issue, but it's not. It's important. And so thank you so much, all of you, for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Juarez. Couldn't say it better myself. Colleagues, any other questions at this time? Vice Chair Mosqueda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping that we could go back to the slide that showed the historic redlining that's occurred in the city. I want to thank Sandra for your words as you described the importance of this map and the overlay with where trees exist. I think that the presentation as a whole intended to highlight the racist comments that were embedded in public policy in the past that had prevented people from living in certain areas of the city, and also correspondingly had reduced the amount of tree canopies, especially in communities of color where folks had been only allowed to live, so excluded from other high opportunity areas, is what I took away from the map and the inclusion of this redlining historical document that you've included. And I think that it's really important that we highlight that map, so thank you, and I want to thank the folks from the Seattle, I'm forgetting their name right now, but they did put out the amazing report last year that also highlighted this. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, the housing. That's it.
It was just on the tip of my tongue, and I also.
Okay, well, I apologize to our friends over there because it's an incredible report that was released in December 2018 that included this map, and with it the need for denser communities across our city, and for us to specifically address the redlining that's occurred and the legacy of that racist and historic past. And as we seek